you. What a wonderful day, and good morning to most of you that are on this call. And it's exciting for me today to share with you a good friend of mine. And before we get started, tell you a little bit about who I am, and then more importantly, our guest. My name is Mark Stevens. I lead the manufacturing and consulting practice for Wipfli. Wipfli's been helping manufacturers for 82 years, help solve their business problems and the challenges that most manufacturers run into. Myself, I've been, for 30 years, have been helping manufacturers out, in particular around continuous improvement and technology solutions. And so we all at Wipfli have a passion to help those manufacturers become more cost-effective and more efficient in the things that they do every day. But today I want to announce kind of a special guest today, and Philip Kirby is, you're going to enjoy his perspectives. He's not only a lean expert, a phenomenal speaker, and even a better author. And I've got a long, relationship with Philip, and he's not only been an inspiration for me, but also a mentor. And so I'm hopeful today that you'll see that the 25 years of experience that this man has had in helping organizations move to another plateau is phenomenal. And he's got a couple books that are out, and the one that I particularly really enjoyed, and it kind of moved me in my lean thinking and lean practice, is really Thoughtware. And if you haven't grabbed a copy of that, it's probably worth a trip to the internet to find one of those. And Philip, I got to tell you, I wore that book out. In fact, the covers are just about gone on it. Most of the pages are scribbled with notes and highlighters, and some pages are actually ripped out, and I use them as part of my everyday presentation. So I am forever grateful for that book, and so I'm really excited to have you here with us, and I'll let all the people that have joined today to hear your words. So thanks again, Philip, for participating.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So let's get started, man. We got a lot to cover. I got some pretty probing questions for Philip, and I'm hopeful everybody will jot down some of the notes and that Philip shares with us. You know, the other day I had a chance to pick up the phone, and I was talking to Philip, and I was excited to hear that another book is coming out, and it's The Process Mind. And I got to tell you, in the 30 minutes that you shared with me, the perspectives of it, it just made me excited to know that there's just another perspective that you're going to share with us. So why don't you take a couple minutes with our audience and tell us a little bit about this new book that you got going on, and then and kind of what it's all about. So I'll let you kind of run with that for a bit.
Okay, Mark. Well, thank you. In terms of a background, I first, we're going to talk a little bit about the process mind, but the premise of the process mind is this, that all businesses we know are systems or a series of processes. And my observation over the years that we continue to look at snapshots or isolated parts of the system or the process and wonder why our deepest problems aren't solved. They're not going to be solved by isolated shots. They're going to be looking at the process itself. I ran into the Toyota production system back in the middle of the 80s. I became fascinated by the idea of just-in-time and got on the TQM bandwagon that really started in 1980. But it wasn't until 1990 that the term lean production really came out, that was coined by Womack and company, and the machine that changed the world, which you're all familiar with, which really introduced this new paradigm of manufacturing, a new way of thinking. One, in fact, that the authors proposed would change the world. They said that the adoption of lean production would spread beyond the auto industry and would change everything in every industry and change choices for consumers, change the nature of work, the fortune of companies. They even said it would change the fate of nations. And ever since, lean has been touted as a blueprint for remaking organizations as a business operating system. And it has moved beyond the automobile industry in all types of industries, chemical processing and pharmaceuticals and banking, insurance, hospitals, etc. And yet, 2.5 decades later, having taught and worked in numerous countries and numerous industries and numerous processes, finding that what's wonderful about lean is it just works. It just fundamentally is a powerful concept, and it works. Is that survey after survey is indicating that only about 2% of the companies have a lean program that achieved the results. And I became curious as to why this was. There was an article in 2008, an extensive survey by Industry Week magazine that I cite in the book that really found 2% of the companies have a lean program. And even extraordinary lean senseis and experts like Rother and Lickard and others have confirmed that that's about the limitation of the penetration of real lean. Cliff Ranson, who's a president of Ranson Research and is a fascinating guy out of Boston that goes to the Gemba before he makes an investments, and has had huge success investing in lean industries and lean operations, because he says it's the only thing that works, is saying that 85% of the companies that are doing lean, he says, quote unquote, are clueless. That another 10% know the jargon, but perhaps 2 to 5% are skillfully practicing. And so I'm wondering if this is such a powerful thing, and if it works, and it's so appropriate to what we need to do today. And what I really came down to was there were a couple things missing, and the thing that was missing is what I refer to as the process mind. That we continue, although we try and lean out processes by moving from batch and queue to flow, we continue to live in organizations that are siloized, that are departmentalized, that are functionalized, that focus vertically when we're trying to build a horizontal world. And trying to plant this lean thing into that kind of environment is sort of like planting seeds in an unfertile field. Unless we can really come to grips with this idea of focusing on our organization as horizontal entities, as focusing on the process itself, as opposed to the functions which we're optimizing, we won't get there. And what I demonstrate in my book is that there's an axiom here that works every time, that if we focus on discrete resources in our operation, our costs will go up, always. And if we focus on the workflow itself, the process, our costs will go down, always. And yet our limitation to focus on the process is really coming down to our inability to look at the value stream, Mark, or look at the horizontal flow, if you will, as opposed to the vertical entity. And so my book is framing ways and opportunities to look at and implement a more horizontal structure that's going to allow us to really reap the benefits of what lean brings to the party.
That's good. That's good insight. Thanks, Phil. Phil, you taught me years ago, it's about how we think. It's about our mind, and certainly there's tools and techniques that you can riddle your desk with those things. But when I meet a lot of these business owners, and they might have read a couple books, or they've gone to some seminars, and they've experimented, and they said, we're as lean as we can be. We're there. We've run through the finish line, and we're in a maintenance mode, and that's certainly a mindset. And so I guess I was excited to listen to you the other day when you were saying, even when people think like that, there's more to be had. Why don't you tell a little bit more about that, what your thoughts are to our audience about, even if you think you've got some good progress, just how much more there is left?
Well, I think they've touched the surface. I always reiterate the story. I have my office is about 30 minutes from the Toyota facility in Cambridge, Ontario, where they're building the Lexus, and occasionally I take executives through it just to really what I call give their head a shake and understand what's going on. And whenever I go in there and watch with fascination how they operate, one of the things they do is they apologize for still having a lot of waste, which always blows my mind because it's the most waste-free. That and perhaps Danaher's plants are the most waste-free operations I've ever seen. So as soon as we think we're there, we're pretty well finished. I think the key here is remember that the whole premise of what we're trying to do with lean is focus on customer value. People say, well, when are you lean? And I say you're lean when every person in your organization can see the flow of value to the customer and fix it if it breaks before it reaches the customer. And if you're in that position, then invite me into your plant so I can document it as a benchmark. If not, you still got some ways to go. Now, one of the interesting things is what are the challenges that the customers have? And for me, roaming around the world with numerous different companies, they've come down to three things today. The customer wants cost reduction, value. The customer wants faster. And the customer, by the way, is going to want something different tomorrow than they did today. In other words, high variety and high customization. And those three things are, in fact, on the surface in conflict. Yes, I can give you a faster delivery, but I'm going to have to build massive inventories to do it, and therefore my costs go up. Or I can drive my costs down, but you can't have it as fast as you want. Or I can drive both down, but don't dare ask for variety. Every time we run an operation and we double our volume, on average for a manufacturer, your costs drop 20 to 25%, depending on what business you're in. But every time you double variety, your costs go up 20 to 35%, depending on what business you're in. In other words, the challenge is how can I mass customize? How can I customize an individualized product? How can I treat myself as a craft producer at a mass-producing price? And the only way I know of doing that is through lean. So if we're truly going to deliver the customer what they want, cost, time, and variety, efficiently, then I think there's a couple key points that we've got to address in lean. And probably the primary one, the one that we were talking about the other day, Mark, was this idea of enabling workers to contribute to their fullest potential. Mm-hmm. Seeking ways to work better means I've got to allow the employees to take precedent. In other words, I look at the key issue of lean where people have fallen down and fallen short is they may be very good at the tools and techniques. They may be very good at implementing Kanban or implementing standard work or implementing 5S or implementing all the other alphabet of products and techniques. But the real heart and soul is to come to terms and say, what I have is I have an obligation to have employees in my operation be successful every time they do their job. And if I truly believe that, then as a leader, I've got to give them the tools and techniques and capability to be successful, which means I've got to give them the ability to identify and remove waste. That is a problem-solving culture. I've got to give them the ability to do that. And I think that's where I find the biggest lack, that if we're really going to be agile enough to deliver low cost, on time, short time, variety, we're going to have to put in the hands of the employees the ability to respond and change very, very quickly. And that means we need to have high respect for them. We've got to leverage their full talent, and we got to give them the right to be successful every time they do their job. Giving people bad processes is not respectful. And so I think you got to go back and look deeply and say, are these processes flexible and agile enough to deliver what the customer wants? And are employees making dramatic changes each day to be able to do that? And I think that's, that's where I'm seeing maybe lean not going as far as we want it to go.
Well, good. That's a great insight again. I've always recognized you as I've done some of these events with you, and I've always been entertained by you're a guy that just loves to roll up your sleeves and just get after it. And as you can probably see, or at least our audiences, you're an engaging person, but the process that you use has always been fascinating. We all read about the value stream mapping or process mapping, and it's easy to get enamored by the details of it. But what I've learned from you is how do you engage people in that process walk? And the other day you were got into this conversation with me, and I want the audience to hear this thing about treasure hunting. And again, it's just another extension of whether it be a map maker or a wasteologist that you talk about in the mapping process. But tell us a little bit more, certainly about the roles of how you engage people in the mapping process itself. But I'm real interested in this more about this treasure hunting.
Well, I dedicate a whole chapter in my book on this idea of treasure hunting, and it's a rather powerful idea. I am a little bit of a heretic, a little bit of unconventional in terms of my approach to lean. I think some of the tools that we've created, and value stream mapping, you mentioned, Mark, is one. I don't see the true lean guys I don't see Toyota using value stream mapping. I think what we're doing is when we get out of the Gemba, when we get into the office and we start to draw maps, then what we're doing is we're drawing representations of the process rather than the process itself. I often do an analogy that says if I wanted to go to visit a foreign country, let's say I decide to go to Rome, I may get a tour package, and I might get a bus tour through the streets, and I'll see the Vatican and some of the sites, and get off at landmarks and go through some tours, and then I'll fly home and say I saw Rome. But in fact, I didn't see Rome. If I want to see Rome, I ought to get I ought to go to Rome and rent a bicycle and a backpack and pedal down the streets into the local cafes and talk to the people, and sit in the parks and talk to the people out in the parks and truly understand it. Now, by doing that, I'm making myself enormously vulnerable. I may, in fact, not see the main sites of the city. I might even, in fact, get mugged along the way. But what I will find is the raw, absolute truth of the process, what's really going on in the Gemba. That being said, the second point is that what we're trying to do is in lean is this. We're trying to design processes to expose problems, and we're trying to create people who are willing and able to solve them as they're exposed. If we're not willing and energetic and dedicated and obsessed with exposing problems in the process, and I define problems as those things that are disruptions to the flow of value to the customer, or what our lean friends call waste, or the stuff that gets in the way of work, if we're not obsessed with exposing and eliminating or mitigating those items, then what are we doing? And so treasure hunting says anytime you find something that disrupts the flow, it's a wonderful treasure. Because if I can countermeasure it, I'm going to be lower cost, faster to market, and more flexible to address variety, the things the customer wants. So when I go into an organization, I don't go anywhere near a conference room. I collect a handful of people, and I take them for a process walk or a treasure hunt in which I give each of them an assignment. I might give one the objective drawing a map, a topographical map of our walk. I'll give another one a camera to tell them to take some pictures of the traditional 6 or 8 types of waste. I will assign a wasteologist to identify what they see as waste. I'll identify a router by wandering around who will be able to draw me a true router. And the router won't be shear punch bend. The router will be go find the work order, go find the steel, go to the supplier and take it out, move it, stage it, set up your machine. In other words, when you've concluded, you've discovered some interesting operational metrics. How many discrete tasks were in the process? How many handoffs were they? How many were value added? How many checkpoints? How far did you travel? How many screens did you access? How many information fields did you fill in? How many handoffs were there? How long did it take? How much of that time was adding value? How much was waiting? In other words, I can get concrete, quick, operational metrics, and I can turn around and say, you know, during this whole exercise, we found that 90 or 95% of what we're doing is not adding value. It's a problem. It's a treasure. And we've sort of liberated ourselves to fix it at that point. So treasure hunting is so much more powerful than mapping because it's tactile, it is emotional, it is in your face. The waste just jumps out and bites you. Every time I do a treasure hunt, and I was calculating when I was doing my book, I've done 1,650 of them approximately so far in about 15 countries and over 100 processes. And it doesn't matter what the process is. The majority of people about halfway through the process walk, stop and say, I apologize, I'm very embarrassed about my process. And I say, no, 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 you're very brave about your process. You got great courage to come out into this process and look it in the face and stare down the waste. And I think for the most part, we spend a lot more time hiding problems with policies or with activities than we do actually seeing, exposing the waste, I guess is a better way of putting it. So when I do a process walk, I try and in sort of a Zen-like fashion be the product, be the purchase order, be the check, be the widget, be the part, and see how I travel through and all the stuff that happens that is not adding value to the customer as I go through. And I just find that we do that. We come back and we spend, by the way, my treasure hunts are never more than 90 or 120 minutes. I just need a small segment of the process to see it. And if I've got a larger process, do multiple treasure hunts. Mm-hmm. And then I bring it back and we do some analysis on it and we look at what the process could look like without waste. And for the most part, we can go on and implement that pretty readily. And if we do that often enough, like 70 or 80 times a year, you're going to quickly, in months, build a remarkably healthy, lean process. It's just a remarkable tool to use.
Oh, great. You know, it's always been my favorite is that when we're doing the process walks it's somewhat of a kind of a gentleman's bet is how many minutes before there's those aha moments and those moments where people say, you know, I didn't know you wanted me to do that or you needed that, because there really isn't the communication between the supplier and the internal supplier and customer relationships. And so by just creating this walk, it allows you to make it so visual and allows you to kind of be more vulnerable to talk about the process. So it's a great tool.
I think the key here is what the lean people call learning to see. Mm-hmm. Or noticing. It's sharpening your eyes to be able to see specifically where the waste is and what it is. And when you do that, the opportunities are just enormous.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about kind of setting the stage and kind of putting those wasteologist goggles on, and you're seeing things differently. But and we've all seen so many people just get excited about it, and they run right into the firestone. Maybe you can, and we know there's tripwires and roadblocks that happen along the way. Maybe you can just give some people some insights of the 1,650 walks that you've done. what are those tripwires, and give somebody some heads up of what they can expect on the early stages of this journey and maybe even deeper into the journey.
Well, I think the limitation is, of course, a number of things, but predominantly it's management's limitation to be able to go out and allow the organization to experiment in a risk-free, non-punitive, no-fear environment to countermeasure these wastes they see in the treasure hunt. So if they come back with some wonderful ideas on how to eliminate the waste and how to dramatically improve the process, that needs to be a situation where management can immediately go ahead and say, okay, let's make that change, or give them total freedom to go and make the change, as opposed to having to stop and study it and evaluate it. The problem is managers are absolutely wonderful at doing. They're wonderful at collecting information and make decisions. They've learned that in their management education, whether it be an MBA level or hard knock school. What they're not very good at is discovery and experimentation. Venturing into areas where it may or may not come out successfully. In other words, they need proof that it's going to work before they move ahead. And of course, as you know, any experiment is simply a hypothesis, and the outcome is I learned something. And so management has to shift to say, I don't know whether this will work or not. My hypothesis says it will. Let's try it. And once you've got comfortable with that, then you can move ahead. One of the ways that's really neat that I use to sort of crack that equation is what I borrowed from Tacciono's circle exercise, which is a simple simulation, in which I take the executives on the floor and I have them observe a specific part of the organization by virtually nailing their feet to the ground or standing in a circle, which they can turn around, and ask them to identify 30 items of waste in 30 minutes. And then in the next 30 minutes, I ask them to make one change. So, for example, they may have observed a guy moving quite a distance to retrieve a part or retrieve an Allen wrench or to retrieve something they needed, and their suggestion, their action would be to move that item permanently closer to the location of use. By itself, it's mundane. By itself, it's a pedestrian act. By itself, it's not going to change the world. But it does point to the managers that if they had all kinds of people doing that on an ongoing basis, then all those little changes would add up. That the manager's got to learn that if they walk through their process and find $20 on the floor, they might pick it up. They're not going to find $20, but they will find $20 of pennies. The tendency is to step over the pennies, but you've got to learn to stop and pick them up. And because it's very difficult for managers to pick up all the pennies, they need to build an environment that allows their organization to constantly treasure hunt, constantly expose problems, and constantly experiment with the capability to remove or mitigate that waste. And so the biggest, limitation is really getting the managers, the leaders, to allow, if you will, or what I call allowment in my book, to allow the organization to go ahead and make the changes it needs to make. And if they don't do that, then it becomes rather difficult to move ahead. Instead of saying, will it work, go ahead and try it and see how it works out. the dilemma that the traditional leader has, I believe, and the reason that we've had limitations in success of this wonderful idea called lean or process mind, is that how do I get hundreds or thousands or dozens of employees to follow leadership I want? And at the end of the day, if I tell them what to do, I've stripped them of the responsibility of doing it. If I don't give them some direction, then they're going to go willy-nilly and out of control. I need to find the midway point. And the midway point is to give them some solid methodology, a process walk, and a way of doing simple, let's call it Kaizen or improvement, a simple way of exposing problems and being willing and able to problem solve them so that the organization can move forward in a way they want it to move forward without having to fear that it's going to get out of control. And I think that's sort of the nut that we've got to crack, Mark, in terms of managers getting brave, managers getting confident enough to let this experimentation idea, this discovery, this learn and adapt pedagogy run rampant through their organization in a controlled way.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's certainly been my experience, and from your advice, is to create that first showcase, because it's all about, drawing that hypothesis or that experiment. And I've heard so many times, if I only had a nickel for, well, we're different, and it won't work for us. And we always say, well, let's just experiment, try and see what happens. And creating that just first environment, like through the process walk, and eventually creating a showcase of something that's better is certainly a long ways towards making leaders see a different perspective. Philip, we've read a lot, and quite frankly, I think sometimes individuals that have taken up this lean as being an expert or the profession have maybe over-sensationalized the benefits, and sometimes they're not believable in some cases. But I've heard you and experimented myself about doing things twice as fast and half the time, and all those things are just almost unbelievable. But maybe you could share with our audience kind of a practical perspective. What do you think the benefits are, and how do you kind of communicate those benefits, maybe if you're a little bit lower in the organization and you're trying to communicate up some of these things that you could expect? And so why don't you give us a little insight on that?
Well, the irony is, I have yet to run into a process that couldn't be improved by 50% based on the existing investment base. I call it the entitlement point of a process. I've already invested in the capital, human capital, financial capital, physical capital, but I'm getting, half as much return on that investment as I need to. So it's not a matter of spending money, it's a matter of redesigning your process. The process only has three dimensions. You have a customer demand. If you understand what that demand is, and you can quantify it, which you can, lean people will quantify it in terms of tact time, then the equation you're solving for is tact time. You only have two leverages. You can either hire more resources, which may hurt you financially, or you can redesign your process. And without a redesign of your process, you're not entitled to any productivity improvement. Anything else you do other than to redesign your process is arbitrarily, and I'll state, doomed to failure. So your obligation now is to go in and redesign your process, which fundamentally means take the waste out of it, take 50% of the time out of it through removing waste. Now, the first thing that you're going to gain by doing this, or you must do, is the engagement of people. You need to have people who own and solve problems. And I'm not talking about the engagement of people in terms of this soft, abstract idea of employee engagement that we've been touting since 1970. I'm talking about the obligation, the expectation that employees' number one job is the identification and removal of waste, and facetiously, if they have time after that to build cars or build widgets, go ahead. But we've got a sense that employees will be engaged when they have an opportunity to remove the silly things from their environment. So the number one output here is that. The concrete output, however, is financial in nature, but it's measured operationally. The number one thing I'm trying to get in terms of process improvement is capacity, or more specifically, throughput. Number one, in trying to increase the throughput through the process pipe, whatever that might be. And that should be the number one metric that I'm trying to get to. The second thing is I'm trying to do it in a half the time or faster time. So the number two metric is I should be after speed. And the number three metric is cost. If I am getting things through faster, if I am getting more things through, then I'm probably getting them through, more through with the same asset base. In other words, my productivity has gone up. So the important thing is to measure those three things and measure them in that order. There's no use trying to cut costs first, because if I cut costs first, I'm limiting the exact resources I need to enhance throughput. There's no use increasing my velocity if I'm just going to be whacking resources to get it through. So the benefits are employee engagement, throughput, time, and cost. Now, that being said, the breakdown is something like this. If I am trying absolutely to address customer value, customer focus as part of my process, then I've got to do that at the expense of everything else. In other words, shareholder value, profits, the financial dimensions that are important to me are not the objective of lean. They are a design specification of process redesign. If I am not reducing my costs by doing lean, then I am not doing lean. But if I aim the purposes at lean absolutely to reduce cost as the primary focus, then I'm going to limit my capability. Cost is a byproduct. Cost is a natural output of redesigning your process effectively. The difficulty we run into is that we are living within accounting architecture that encourages us to do the very opposite. It encourages us for short-term thinking. It encourages us to make the budget. It encourages us to meet month end. It encourages us to respond to the analysts on the street. If we would overcome that and focus on the customer value, the shareholder value will fall in place. But focusing on shareholder value isn't necessarily going to give us customer value. And that's a pretty tough thing to swallow for the executives and the leaders that are being measured and held accountable for the valuation of their companies. So what becomes really important here is to understand that the real benefits, the real bottom line improvement, bringing lean right to the financials, which it should be doing, is a little paradoxical in that it needs us to focus on customer value, which we defined as their need for value or price or cost, their need for fast, quick responsiveness, and their need for flexibility. I need it different from yesterday. Their needs become priority, and if we can build processes to deliver that, our costs will fall in line. Remember, our traditional accounting architecture is working against us. It says that if we build more inventory, we can drive down unit costs. If we can run larger batches, we can drive down unit costs. But in fact, lean is not chasing these economies of scale. Lean is chasing economies of flow. And as such, it has a different financial architecture. And the way I look at it is there's only two things in your organization financially that are important: cash and inventory, because neither of them lie. The rest is accounting architecture. And so if we focus on cash, if we focus on inventory, focus on time, we focus on throughput, we will dramatically improve our bottom line. If we improve our bottom line, we'll increase our valuation. And that's a difficult lesson to learn for organizations that are worshiping at the altar of month-end performance.
Well, Philip, I appreciate that perspective, and I know that might be a lot for everybody to take in, but this is that trust, and I live in an accounting world, and many of my clients are very financially orientated, and the logic that you just shared with us is if you slow that down, people will begin to understand that, and it is it's to me, it's the most critical piece of getting the senior management to understand what are we ultimately measuring to define whether or not the effort and the calories that go into this are demonstrating a benefit. So really, really important that thinking.
Yeah, so, the way to think about it, to make it practical, is remember the number one thing I'm looking at in customer demand is building a process to fulfill customer demand. Mm-hmm. What is customer demand? So, for example, if I can define it as attack time, which is an incredibly powerful concept, I've got to release a truck every 22 minutes. I've got to process a check every X amount of minutes. I've got to whatever it is, and I solve for that equation, then it'll show up in my financials. I guarantee it. It'll show up in spades. And therefore you'll hit every financial performance number you need to hit. Think about the great organizations out there. What they're fundamentally doing is their processes are faster, better than yours. The only difference they have is their processes are faster and better than yours. People often say, I'd sure like to be Apple. Well, how many people have considered that Apple turns its inventory 74 times a year? Maybe that's why they're profitable. And nobody wants to be BlackBerry. Well, maybe that's because BlackBerry just wrote off $1 billion of inventory, turned their inventory at 1/2 a times a year, and even at their best days was 11 times a year. There's a correlation there, and people got to wake up to it.
Mm-hmm. Very, very nice. Well, we've talked a little about readying the top of the organization, those executives and the managers and the leaders. We talked about some of those financial and non-financial measures that kind of help validate that these principles, ideas, and energy you put in are going to make sense. But let's talk about deep in the Gemba. There's we always say the guys and gals closest to the work.
Yeah.
And not always is everybody as excited as we can be about the benefits. So maybe you could share with the audience, those folks that are closest to the work, they're going through a transition too. How do you deal with the ones that really don't want this responsibility of owning their own processes?
Well, my experience is, I hate to be facetious at all, but I'm saying that managers sort of get the employees they deserve. Employees that I've run into are very, very excited about engaging in improving their processes. In other words, they want to be successful. And if we look at employees as wanting to be successful, if we look at it as having a right to make them successful, then we should be down there giving them the support they need to do so. We should be giving them the information, the authority, and skills that they require, and giving them a very clear understanding of what the objectives are. And if we do that, if we set those expectations, if we set the challenge high, my experience is that employees respond. I was telling you a story the other day. I think it was in the written part that I had an opportunity when Toyota opened their new plant down in Woodstock to observe some of the early recruiting practices, and actually, statistically, as I said, it would be tougher to get into the Harvard MBA program than getting on the line in that plant. What's remarkable about the recruiting process is that the number one thing, yes, they're looking for dexterity, yes, they're looking for mental agility, yes, they're looking for, wholesome, all the things that you and I are looking for. But more than anything, they're instilling in these people an understanding that they have an obligation to identify and solve problems when they come to work. And that if they're not interested in that, then they probably don't work there. I'm wondering how hard managers in organizations are actually setting the expectation that we want the employees to identify and solve work, that we expect employees to bring forth treasures, that exposing problems is not a punitive shoot-the-messenger exercise. It's an embracing, wonderful thing to do. And I would say that the heart and soul of this issue of employees wanting to take control is a management issue of really believing that we have a right to give the employees a chance to be successful every time they do their job, that we expect them to be willing and able to solve problems, and that we give them the problem-solving tools to do so. And by the way, I think in a manufacturing environment and in an office environment to some degree, that the number one way of doing that is by establishing what I call intelligent floors, or what you might know as visual management, or elements of 5S. In other words, if you can build an intelligent floor, that is a floor that talks to you, that's visually has all the elements of navigation and structure, place for everything and everything its place, etc., employees will respond to that environment in an intelligent way. There's a correlation from my experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hey, Philip, I want to take advantage of what you just taught me about, customer value, and I'm seeing some inbound questions here, and they're pretty good, and I want to put you on the spot a little bit.
Sure.
But I want you to maybe respond to this first question I'm seeing is, they're going, hey, Philip, there's a lot of conversation, and I relate to the kind of the shop floor activities you're talking about. But my role is inside the business processes. I'm in the front office. Give me some insight on how I can apply some of these principles in the front office.
Well, it always amazes me that people come forth and say, well, I'm not a manufacturer, this doesn't apply. Well, my question is, do you put customers first? And do you deliver what they need? Do you need to deliver it efficiently? Do you need employees to contribute to their full potential? Do you need to search for different ways of working? Do you need to give people meaning by connecting the company strategy and measurement system what you're doing? Yes, they say. Well, then it doesn't really matter what business you're in. You're in the business of improving customer value. Then lean and its tenets work. You're sequencing work. You're assigning resources to specialized tasks. You're setting and committing to quality levels. You're releasing output with some cadence in some way. The office environment has got to stop being afraid of embracing the tenets of operational excellence. It's got to not be afraid of understanding that it has designed processes that it can follow. And it's in any kind of industry or operation, it works. I mean, there's not an industry that I haven't done treasure hunts and lean. Asset management operations, or restaurants, or hospitals that are moving patients, or banks that are moving checks through the system, or even adjudication systems, or processing claims, or installing controls out in remote locations. In each case, we have demand, and we have capacity, and we have variability. And the trick is to manage the variability. In offices, there may be more variability, but that's just a matter of degree. We recently did a large job with an airline group on what you've all experienced on boarding an airline. And one of the things as we discovered is boarding an airline is a process as well. It sequences work and assigns resources to specialized tasks and sets on-time levels and releases a loaded, serviced, airworthy aircraft every X amount of time. So we've really got to begin to think about all processes, regardless of manufacturing, as having a purpose, having measure, having action that they can perform in. So the office is no different. Now, what is different that we got to think about is that there probably is more customization in the office, which is a good thing because that's what Lean addresses so well. There are some things that we want to design our processes in the office to be rudimentary, that they should be standardized. And there are some that are very circumstantial and need to be individualized. My history is that 80% of what's in the office can be run through an ATM machine, if you will, and the 20% needs a huge amount of customer interference, customer intervention, judgment. The problem is, if that group of people is working on the rudimentary ATM side of the business, it's not working on the large value problem solving. So the only difference in the office is begin to think about how you sort your processes and sort them by the dimensions of time and sequence, which is a bigger discussion than we've got time for here. But to summarize your question, it's exactly the same as any other manufacturing process. It's just an office process. And it just happens to need to be attacked in a different way. Just on a quick footnote, ask yourself if the process is a logistics process, I'm moving something, a transactional process, I'm converting data into information, a relationship process, say a call center where consumption and production are simultaneous, or it's a knowledge creation process like an engineering office or a laboratory. Regardless of them, they all can benefit massively from the process mind and from lean thinking.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff. Well, looks like we've got one more question. This is an interesting one, and we'll wrap it up after this one, Philip. It says, Mark and Phil, I'm a traditional leader today, but recently I've been appointed to be the new lean leader. And I'm not sure what that means. Is it the same as what I'm doing today, just doing more of it? Or could you give me some ideas, maybe give us a couple, kind of what are the big differences between maybe this traditional leader and the lean leader?
Well, perhaps the biggest difference of the lean leader is that they've got to be able to see the organization horizontally, not vertically. That they've got to make sure and ask themselves when they're making a decision, is this helping the downstream point of that process, the output of the process, or is this helping just a silo within it? Remember, whenever we work on the workflow, our costs go down. We work on the silo, our costs go up. They need to adopt a mind that they no longer have a sales department. They have a process to generate demand for their goods. So it becomes really important, number one, that they have a clarity of a horizontal process. The second thing is the lean manager needs to challenge the organization. They should not be shy about demanding what they want. going out and demanding a 50% increase in productivity in this particular area, and then getting out of the way to let employees do it. Our tendency is to go out and look for 2 or 3%, to dabble at the edges and never have the courage to go out and really challenge. The third thing they have to do is they have to be obsessed with this idea of go-see, of direct observation, of treasure hunting, that they have to be intimately aware of how their processes work and go down and help the employee do what they want to do, not by telling them, but asking them about their challenges, asking them about their ideas, asking them about real causes and root causes, asking them about ideas for solutions, and following up. And when they do that, they have to have enormous amount of respect for people. That is, expect people to solve problems. So what I would say is, have a horizontal view, challenge the organization, go see, and go see with respect for people. And if you do those handful of things, you're a lean leader. You're becoming a lean leader as opposed to the traditional leader. Remember, the lean leader is not gauged by their performance of the decisions they make or the solutions they come up with. They're gauged by the clarity of direction that leads people to come up with solutions and decisions. They're not accountable for a personnel policy manual. They're accountable for a policy on treating people. And I find that the lean leader needs to make that shift, which is a very difficult one. And for most people, they think it's innate. But in fact, it isn't. It's tough.
Well, this is once again been refreshing for me personally, and I suspect that I'm looking at the long list of people that joined us today, and I want to thank everybody for taking an hour out of your day. And I'm hopeful that Philip has given you some new ideas and some hope around the lean push. And I can encourage you, if you want to learn more, I personally have been drawn to his ThoughtWare book. As I said earlier, I wore it out. And some of the thinking that you heard today, you'll find inside the front and back cover of that book. Phil, give us some insight when the new books come out.
So the manuscript's in. The publishers, Taylor and Francis out of New York, have told me that it'll be available for sale the 1st of September of this year, and we're looking forward to promoting it and sharing some of the thoughts in it. Most of them are case studies that I've experienced myself, and we hope that somebody will reach out. If you want to order it now, you can pre-order it, but it should be September, Mark. Okay,
well that's good. What we'll do is those of you who've signed up, we'll just send a reminder out there, and if it's something that you're interested in, help yourself. And so, if there's any more questions or thoughts that please send them in. And we're gathering those questions. I see there's some more here. Philip and I will huddle around those, and we'll get those answers back to you so you can continue to keep your momentum. And just a reminder, just jump out there on the Whipfly website, and you can see manufacturing. Tomorrow we've got a blog out there and has many topics like we just talked about today, and they're quick reads, and there's a couple ebooks in there that for those that want a little bit more in depth. So we'd encourage you to go out there, but most importantly, give us feedback. What are the things that you need or want from resources like Philip and myself, so that your journey can continue on. So thanks again, Philip. I totally appreciate you finding this hour today to share your thoughts. And I want to thank everybody who attended today, and good day, and thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Bye.